Oh my God. Last night I witnessed firsthand the devastating effects of a fire in a high-rise building in Ballymun. I also witnessed the courage of the emergency services, the fire brigade, the Gardaí and Dublin City Council in responding to the fire. We owe them our deepest gratitude for the courage and fortitude they showed last night. The staff in the buildings are also to be thanked for the role they played in helping to evacuate the almost 200 people in the buildings. However, we now need answers to a number of important questions. How a fire could spread so quickly from floor to floor and from apartment to apartment. How was it that the fire spread not just to apartments above the source of the fire, but also to apartments below the source? Why didn't the fireproofing methods in the building contain the fire more? What triggered this fire? How was the alarm raised? Were alarm and smoke detectors working on every floor? Was every apartment checked? Is it the case that the fire brigade ladder couldn't reach the higher floors? That was fairly evident from being there. So there's obviously a serious question when it comes to getting proper ladders to reach higher floors, and that is something that has to be addressed. People will say it's too early to get the answers, and you'll probably say the same yourself. But these questions, they need answers, especially when we consider that there are even higher skyscrapers throughout the city and more being built. We cannot have a fire service under-resourced. We have to have the resources. And there are serious problems with recruitment in the fire service and the equipment they're using. And time out of number, this has been raised. And attempts to remove the ambulance service from the fire brigade has been ongoing for a number of years. This is totally unacceptable. Everyone knows that the first people who respond in the ambulance service is the fire brigade, and they are always on hand.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. You have 4 minutes to reply.
I thank deputies for raising this very important matter today. In relation to the fire in Ballymun, a fire broke out in an apartment on the 13th floor of the Metro Hotel, an apartment building in Ballymun at approximately 2000 hours last night, Wednesday the 21st of March 2018. The fire extensively damaged the 13th and 10th floors of the building. The building was evacuated successfully, and there are no reports of missing persons or injuries at this point. 11 units of Dublin Fire Brigade, comprising 8 fire engines, 2 aerial appliances and the Incident Command Unit involving approximately 60 firefighters under the command of the Chief Fire Officer, responded and assisted with evacuation as well as fighting the fire. The fire has now been extinguished, but the Fire Brigade remain in attendance. An Garda Síochána were at the scene overnight and managed traffic in the area to facilitate firefighting. It is understood the Garda will investigate the cause of the fire, and the Dublin Fire Brigade will also carry out an initial review of the scene and their response in the days ahead. At this point, I'm sure deputies on all sides will join and have joined with me in expressing appreciation to the emergency services and all others involved in responding to last night's incident, about which I was kept informed as events unfolded through liaison between the Fire Brigade and officials in my department. None of us are obviously on the front line when it comes to these types of emergencies, but it seems very tense from our point of view. We can only imagine what the firefighters felt, and they are incredibly brave for the work that they do. Turning now to the Fire Safety Task Force, which I established in response to the Grenfell Tower tragedy of the 14th of June 2017, in recognition of fears expressed for fire safety here in Ireland. On the 27th of June of last year, I tasked my department's National Directorate for Fire and Emergency Management with convening and coordinating a high-level task force to lead Ireland's reappraisal of fire safety. The task force held its most recent meeting, which was its 10th meeting, on the 22nd of February of this year, and discussed the most up-to-date draft of its report. In the intervening time, the National Directorate had to deal with the significant snow event associated with Storm Emma and has not had an opportunity to consider the task force members' feedback on this latest draft. Notwithstanding this, I expect to receive the full report of the task force before the end of April. In addition to establishing the task force, local authorities were requested to undertake a number of initial actions, and the task force was requested to oversee and report on a review of fire safety in both social housing and fire safety in medium to high-rise buildings. As part of these initial actions, local authorities in June of last year were asked to assess multi-storey social housing buildings' fire detection and alarm systems, emergency lighting systems and common escape routes, including corridors, stairways and emergency exits, and to ensure that such systems are in place and fully functional. The local authorities responded fully to my request and carried out the inspections and works arising within the required timeframes. To give an indication of the extent of this exercise, some 1,230 multi-storey social housing buildings in Ireland were reported back to my department, containing some 16,780 flats. 64% of the buildings and 77% of the flats were in the 4 Dublin local authority areas, 7% of the buildings and 5% of the flats were in the 2 Cork local authority areas, and 4% of the buildings and 4% of the flats were in the Limerick local authority area. Overall, the review was a comprehensive exercise and highlights that local authorities are fully engaged on their fire safety responsibilities to those who rely on social housing. This initial work in relation to appraisal of the fire safety in medium to high-rise buildings was carried out, and all the local authorities have reported back to my department as requested in this regard also. The work undertaken by local authorities has identified 842 buildings within the medium and high-rise category, 291 of which were identified as having certain categories of external cladding. After preliminary consideration, local authorities, using their powers under Section 18(6) of the Fire Services Act, have requested the persons having control of 237 of these buildings to have detailed fire safety assessments carried out. The work by persons having control of these buildings and their professional advisors to carry out and report the fire safety assessments is ongoing. As of the end of January of this year, 99 fire safety assessments had been received by fire authorities, and further actions proposed or under consideration in 8 cases, 6 residential and 2 non-residential. A guidance note, Fire Safety Guidance Note 01 of 2017, this is assessing existing cladding systems in buildings of more than 6 stories and more than 80 metres in height, was developed by a task force subgroup and has been circulated to fire authorities and placed on my department's website as a support for those undertaking assessments of cladding in medium to high-rise buildings. The task force subgroup will maintain oversight of the review of these assessments in the months ahead, dealing with any emergent issues and providing an oversight report at the end of the process. It is understood that the building in Ballymun, which went on fire last night, was identified in the survey of medium to high-rise buildings undertaken as part of the work of the Fire Safety Task Force in the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower fire. Initial indications are that cladding was not a contributing factor in this fire. As indicated earlier, the fire will now be subject to a full Garda investigation, the outcome of which will of course be carefully considered.
Thank you, Minister.
I thought, Chair, I might have additional time because the deputies had additional time.
I'll be flexible given that it's because of the issue.
I appreciate that very much, Chair. Thank you. The fleet of fire engines available to fire services requires ongoing investment to ensure that reliable and appropriate fire engines are available to respond to emergencies. In order to ensure that fleet age profile is maintained, a further investment of €9.2 million under the 2017 Fire Appliance Procurement Programme was announced last year, which will see the construction and delivery of 23 new appliances between 2018 and 2020, with an expected contribution of €400,000 per unit from my department's capital programme. Some fire authorities may choose to select aerial appliances, turntable ladders or hydraulic platforms in lieu of allocated Class B, which is the standard fire engines. And to conclude, Chair, I look forward to receiving the overview of fire safety in Ireland, which the Task Force is preparing and which I expect will propose a programme of fire safety initiatives to address what the Task Force identifies as the priority areas of concern with regard to life safety. While the evacuation process worked successfully to ensure public safety in last night's incident, in conjunction with Dublin City Council and Dublin Fire Brigade, I will consider if there are specific issues arising from this incident which require follow-up action. I would like to conclude, Chair, by again expressing our deep appreciation to all of our emergency services personnel and everyone else involved in ensuring a timely and effective response to last night's incident. They do this work on a daily basis on behalf of all of us, but sometimes it takes a very serious and alarming incident as what occurred last night for us to realise just the importance of the work that they do and the bravery that they have in doing that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
I think, Minister, you mentioned about the task force and it's the 10th meeting and that you won't have anything back by April. Really, there is an urgency because you did mention that there was a lot of buildings that were identified that works needed to be done, and that hasn't been done by a large number of those. That needs to be addressed, and they need to be forced to deal with this. There's people have lost their homes here. There's also, how will you help with this? There's 100 staff out of work. There's, will you get welfare officers to contact people that need help? Is there compensation available? Is there counselling services for some of these who absolutely went through a trauma? And there's a lot of items lost. Will the welfare officers be instructed to help these people out in terms of what has been lost? I think it's very important. This hotel, the Metro, was built in the regeneration of Ballymun, and it was one of the landmarks for Ballymun. And it is very important that we get to the bottom of this and get back and get this operational again. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. You have 2 minutes and 2 minutes only.
Thank you, Chair. No, and I appreciate the additional time that you gave me earlier, so I'll try and even keep it quicker than 2 minutes. Just in relation to the work that has been ongoing, in relation to the medium to high-rise category, which was the second phase of the task force group's work, 842 buildings were identified in that category. 237 buildings were deemed as needing further detailed assessments as to their fire safety and life safety measures. As of at the end of January this year, 99 of those assessments had taken place, and only 8 cases out of the 99 required further actions. 6 were residential buildings, 2 were non-residential buildings. So a huge amount of work is being done by the task force. And it comes back then, Deputy Alice, to your point. Task force has had 10 meetings. So what it is trying to do at the moment, or